Welcome to Opportunity Knocks. I can't believe I'm saying this. Episode 7. This is incredible that it's going by this quick and I'm having this much fun. This is awesome. Thank you guys all for listening and watching and following me on this journey as I build businesses in 2024. Today's a special one because we all spend so much time on, you know, brand and a name. Like, what do I name my company? We're starting a company. What's the logo going to be? And I move it here. There's so many. And then at the end of the day, isn't it really built over time? I mean, look at Google. Look at McDonald's. Look at these brands that if I told you I was naming this company Google before Google even came around, you'd say you're crazy. I mean, Google sounds like no one. What is it? And it's built its name over time. No one taught me better than this than our guest today. Um, he's a really good friend of mine, but on top of that, he's a genius. This guy when it comes to branding and positioning the brand and stuff. So I'm even though that today is technically the solo day of me just doing it by myself. I said, Mike, I'm going to need you. I'm like Joe Torre calling him in from the bullpen. I said, I need a reliever here. And he literally saved my day. Let me give you the backstory before I introduce Mike. So as I'm building this home service business, which I've talked about, and I said, you know what? What I'm doing is I'm consolidating, I'm organizing a very fragmented industry, right? With this platform, this technology. And I came up with the name One Home Service, and I showed a couple people, and I don't like it. One, that's the name that and I don't know if you don't know what you don't know, and branding and coming up with a name, it's just not my strength. But one of the things that I think we're going to learn through this journey is we're not good at everything, and if you can identify what you're not good at and audible that and say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna find somebody who's good. It goes back to the network. This is why your network is so important. I literally made a call to Mike a couple days ago and told him, here's what do you think about this? And I always thought Mike's background was in production, actually production film, and it turns out he's he's got an incredible resume. Mike was the vice president of marketing and creative for NBC. I mean, he's a rock star. And I always knew that, but I just thought he did something else. So when I started telling him this, he was firing back with these like incredible. I'm like, man. And then all of a sudden he drove to my house and not, without an invite, he said, I'll help you out. That's the kind of guy he is. So with that, I want to introduce Mike. Mike, so glad you're here, man.
Hey man,
You're saving me, brother.
no problem. I'm glad to be here. I'm a fan of what you're doing so far. I've been
Thanks,
listening
man.
and watching, and I think this is great. So
Awesome, man.
glad to be
Thank
here.
you. And look, it's all about collaborating and working together. And I know you're a big believer in that. And I really thank you for coming out and doing that. So let's take us through the process and going back to what I was doing, which is figuring out what's the right name. And by the way, the first guy that I hired, Mike, was online. I found a freelancer and I said, here's the business. And I laid it out, I kind of wrote a paragraph and said, here's what I want to do. And the first design he sent me, I said, "This is great," because again, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. So either way, I also didn't want to waste too much time on this process and say, "Hey, I got to get this thing started." I'd like to know when I showed it to you, what was your thought of it, and what'd you think about it, and then from there, was it like, what, this is good. We got to change this completely. You're going the wrong way. Tell me kind of your thought process.
So my first thought process, I mean, like Fiverr and Upwork and those things, those actually can be really good tools if you don't know what you're doing. Right? It's a cheap way to just put that first, the shitty first pancake,
Yeah,
if we can say that.
yeah,
The
yeah.
Simon Sinek would call it, just to kind of get something out there. And I think you had some stuff to work with. I think the colors were good. It was gray. It was blue. Psychologically, blue implies trust. For
Hmm.
people, red is energy, yellow is optimism, and orange is optimism. These are things that your brain is just wired to do.
Wow.
So I
Okay.
think you found a few things there. And then I think by the time we're done, you're going to be a little more bullish on One Home Services than you probably already
Sweet.
were. And the reason why I say that is, we spent a lot of time, right? I mean, McDonald's has nothing to do with hamburgers. What was a Google? I remember where I was the very first time I heard that in 1998 or 1999. Somebody said, "Did you Google that?" I said, "What?" A
Right.
guy named Bill Mullins in Detroit. A Yelp review. What is that?
Yeah.
So it's not. We spend a lot of time agonizing over the perfect name up front. But what I say is you got to think about the shorthand of it. And so, why I think this is going to work is if you do this really well, I don't think people over time are going to call this one home services. I think they're just going to start calling it one home. Okay. I was sitting, at a
Awesome.
bar one time with a
Yeah.
buddy who we know, and he was thinking about starting an agency. This is an anecdote that will make some sense. And he was thinking about starting an agency called something like Never Done Improving. Okay. We were at a sports bar. There may or may not have been some beer involved. I'm like, you can't do that. He said, why? I said, because the shorthand of that, think about that in a department head meeting or something. Did you send that invoice to Never Done? Did you get that proof
Oh
from Never Done?
wow.
I
Yeah.
said, you
Put it in
can't
conversation, and it
put it in
doesn't.
conversation
Yeah.
and it doesn't work. I spent a really good time. I run in a thought leadership circle with somebody who used to run marketing for the Miami Dolphins, and she was in a leadership position at Target when Target became a thing. And I remember her telling me a really cool story. She said they had conversations about should we run with this, and ultimately they decided not to. They said because that belongs to the people. The people created that, and
Oh
if we
wow.
take that over, then it's corporate.
Hijacking
It's not
almost.
as
Yeah.
cool. It's hijacking it,
Yeah.
right? So I think you're going to end up being one home
I
if you do
love that,
this
by the
well.
way. And I never thought of one
Mhm.
home. I always thought you have to explain one home service, 3 letter word. It's not, or 3 words, logo. And I'm like, it didn't, I don't know. And then one home, hearing you say that, I think
And
it's
maybe
got,
it starts that way, and you call it one home service, but I can see a husband and wife, like, oh hey, we got to fix the windows, look it up on one home, or hey, we need a roofer. Did you check one home?
so you're taking the name and putting it into real life scenarios. I
Yes,
like that.
yes,
I never did that. I never, and even at a networking event, like when you stand up and say, "Hey, I'm one home," it tells you and that's why I came up with that. So I passed the test, I guess, the first test.
yeah, whether it's by accident or not. And then visually, like I'm not a musically inclined person, but I've heard people who are, they can hear music and see notes.
Mhm.
Okay, I don't do that, but when I saw that, I saw the shapes. So now if you think about it, one home is actually really nice because they're short words, right?
Mhm.
Okay, and then ONEM, all those letters, if you put them in a square, think about that. Like the M hits all four quadrants, the E hits all four quadrants, the O, even though it doesn't hit the corners, it's literally balanced throughout, as opposed to like an I or a Y or an F or something. So, when I looked at that first logo, I'm like, there's some bones here, but the it was all off.
That-
The spacing is off, the alignment is off. And then, if you're somebody who knows you need to know a little bit about design, but don't know anything about it, it's something called the squint test. Have you ever heard of that?
mm,
Okay, so the squint test is if you see a logo,
Squint,
squint.
right?
If you take a logo or something and you squint at it, that will show your brain subconsciously what it processes first. Okay.
Okay.
So if you squint at the logo that you give, the only thing that pops is one. So then the question becomes, is that what you really want people to see? I would argue probably not. You either want that home logo with the check mark, which
Hmm.
is like your secondary, or you want it to say one home.
Hmm.
So by just making a very simple change with color adjustments, and how you space that out, you can line up that one home. So when you squint at it, one home is what you see. Now suddenly you're onto something. But
That's
then I was
awesome.
also thinking, how you can line up some shapes. And for people who are watching this, you'll be able to see it. We'll put it on the screen. If you take the number one, there are some ways to just, kind of morph the one into the home. And before you know it, you've got a much more compact logo, a bolder logo, one that really stands out. So,
So let me ask you on
yeah.
that, because that's something that I thought about as, you're talking about the actual number one, right?
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
so the number one with a domain. How do you play that? Like, is it important? Are you saying that that's a variation of the logo would be the number one?
It's kind of built in there.
Okay.
So it's like there's two ways to do it. I mean, like if you took just say the left edge of an H, right? What if you just put a little one out there and then the rest of it is out there? And and we'll
Uh,
see this on screen. You're going to see it's a lot bolder. It looks very, very
so
cool.
you know what I get confused is that I and McDonald's just with an M is a perfect example. You see the M, and that's what, or the Nike is a, but and I don't know if it's not good. I don't think, but I always think about it's got to be the domain. I don't want people to not know it, but it doesn't, right? You see the
That's
logo, it's like that's that company. It's one home or whatever the URL is, right?
right.
It's
What you're talking about is called the secondary mark. Okay,
okay.
so like that, the Nike swoosh, the swoosh would be the secondary mark. Google, they just use the G. That's called the secondary mark. For yours, it would be that home
with
icon.
with the one.
Yeah,
Oh,
so that would be
okay.
like your
And that would be on like Facebook on like the
Facebook, your
pro.
your app icon. I mean, your
Got it.
app icon was kind of done for you already, right? Or your favicon. If you type in a
Yeah.
URL, it's you could still spell out what
Uh-huh.
on your domain and whatnot like that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's a secondary one. It's called.
it's
Okay.
called the secondary
Didn't
mark
know that.
because you need a horizontal mark because there's going to be places where a horizontal logo where your logo appears horizontally. You need a vertical because there's going to be some times where you need to stack it, and then you need what's called the secondary mark. Or like think of your favorite sports team, right? I mean, like
Mhm.
any logo that would be
Exactly.
like their secondary mark. So
So, by the way, when you were explaining that stuff and you were going deep into that, which was amazing,
Mhm.
you ever seen that meme where the guy's counting like fractions and like the numbers are
yeah,
coming up?
yeah,
That was me.
yeah.
I'm going, what the hell is he talking about?
There you
That's
go.
good stuff.
Now, a lot of that, I mean, you talk about McDonald's, and like those have crossed over. They're in the cultural zeitgeist right now. So
Mhm.
you know what that is like their secondary mark became their primary mark, but for
Mhm.
companies that are just starting out, that's what that would be. So
Awesome.
you
And
got to
then
take
you
that
build
stuff
it
there.
over time. I mean, these are companies that are 50, 60, 80 years. I mean, it's
Exactly
not
right.
like a,
Exactly right.
yeah,
So
that's great stuff. Now, let me just take you back too. So at that time, I hired this freelancer, came up with this. I knew I was a couple months out before, so it was good. It was actually good that I did it just to see something instead of like no logo at all or just like
mhm.
I saw the logo as I was talking to my developer and building this. It kind of inspired me a little bit, if you will. So just having that was good. But at the end of the day, I didn't have brand guidelines. I didn't have any. I didn't know what and how important is that. And then I'm going to tell you what I did. Again, I might have done it backwards, but that's why again you're here with the Superman cape to save the day. But I basically put out on Fiverr. I found a branding guy, and I put it out there. And he basically I said, "Here's what I had before. Here's what I want." And then I shared that with you. What he came, some unbelievable slow. I like how like some of the names maybe didn't work, but a lot of the work he did was good. But again, I feel like I'm all over the place with the brand, right? How how much of a mistake is that? If somebody's starting a business and they're listening to this, what's the right way to go about, because I know it's not the way I just did it, and that's okay. But what's the right way to do it? Is it to start before you do anything? Is find a name and a domain name and then start or is it to work with a brand, somebody like you who knows and how to do this? And can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a silver bullet answer because I've done it both ways, right? Sometimes the logo pops in the visual. Other times I mean, here's the thing. You always got to start with what problem am I solving and who am I solving it for, right? And work backwards from
Yep.
that. But I'll tell you why I thought that brief was really good. When you showed me the logo, I'm like, that kind of fit the visual of what we were doing. And then you showed me the creative brief for sort of that brand plan, which was really well done, but it was a total 180. So that's where you're at a fork in the road
Right.
on who are you going to serve because your logo again kind of is man of the people stuff. The
Mhm.
creative brief was in like cream color palettes and serify fonts. It looked very elite,
Mm.
So are you going for an uber high end consumer or are you going for sort of that middle upper middle class person who is able to outsource some of these home things but also is trying to mind the bills
Yeah.
and I lean towards the logo and that look because my wife and I remember we were in Houston. We were there. We were both working full time, so we were doing well, but we're far from rich. But we had somebody who cut the lawn and a
Mhm.
lady who came to clean the house once a month, and we would get power washed twice a year. I'm like, wow, where do we get a staff from? All of a sudden, all these people in this,
Right.
but
Exactly.
it was very we're very average folks, and I think you also have to keep in mind on the back door when people come into your app what are most of your roofers and pool cleaners and landscapers? They're going to look more like the logo than the creative.
Mhm.
Okay. So I would lean more towards that the bolder colors, the non-serif fonts, the stuff that speaks to the common person more than
Mhm.
this uber upscale audience. It was the creative brief was a little pinky up to me. I guess that's how
Yeah, that's great feedback. Let me add one more element to that because I'd love to hear your thoughts while we have you here. This is awesome, by the way. So the part of me, remember, I'm not making the money doesn't come from the homeowner, but the competitors, I guess we'll call them, Angie's List and these companies that they're basically lead companies for so their end user is the vendors, the
Mhm.
businesses, right?
Mhm.
I feel like I want to, and why I started this company is I want to reverse that. I want it
Right.
to be about the homeowner, even though they're not my client. I'm not making money. They are my client because without them, it doesn't work. The model doesn't work. But the revenues coming from and I haven't even gotten into. I don't know if I've told it to you, but a big part of this app is this platform is that uh, there's a networking element to the vendors that are paying me. So there's the vendors that are paying me are a big time client because obviously that's the revenue that generates. But there's also a networking internally between the 30 industries. I connect them together in a really cool way, which I'll get into more as a. But my challenge with listening to what you just said is I'm not really sure who my end user is. It was in the beginning the homeowner. That's all I care because that's really I want it to be just the most powerful thing. They're never gonna have to worry about getting ripped off. They're gonna save time. They're gonna save money. They're gonna. It's for them because there's an opportunity in that. But then there's also all I'm doing for the vendor. So it's like, do I do half and half or do I go like you know what I'm?
I was thinking about it from the homeowner
Okay,
perspective. Okay, so let me walk through the user journey, right? So I've
yeah,
downloaded the One Home Services app that
right,
may ultimately be One Home. You know, if you were to take what the creative brief looked like, and that was your opening facade, and it's kind of a bougie, scripty font and
uh-huh.
a light cream. Then when I get in there and I start seeing the list of all the vendors, if they look like the blue collar companies that they usually tend to be, it's going to look very different. Like the facade of the house
Hmm.
is going to look different than the
Right,
interior when you get in
right,
there. Versus if you use sort of the logo in that move, I feel like it's a more unified experience. Like, okay, I know what I'm signing up for. This is a
yep,
cohesive brand. So,
that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. So I had the creative brief, and then I had the logo done by two separate people.
It showed.
Yeah. So that's mistake one, which is good that we're talking about it now because we want to fix that before it goes live and it goes right. We want that to be so.
Let me. It depends on what you consider a mistake. I mean, you have to iterate. It's great to see both things, and you can choose. Or
Right.
maybe you're like, "Hey, I only want this app to be for people who
But
make a half a
honestly,
million a year or whatever."
if I didn't have you talking to me and kind of guiding me with this, I wouldn't know,
Yeah,
and I wouldn't have known any of that what you just said. And that's gold for this podcast is to hear you talk about how colors and just little like this the letter that your name is depends because you could put it up against.
mhm,
I mean, I never would think of that stuff. So, um, I guess from here moving forward, is it that I reach out to the first designer or do we even have to reach out to him or how does that work because again these are freelancers that I don't have a relationship with
right.
it's is it something that I say let's take what I have now and not start over but like just what's the next step do you think for me?
Well, now I think you merged the two. The
Okay,
creative brief was very good, and
okay,
I don't want anybody to
yeah,
hear this and think there was a lot of great nuggets in there. A couple. There was something about there's something brilliant in there that was not part of the slogans, but it was about your home should be a source of joy, not stress.
yes,
I think there's something you can mine in
yes,
that, more joy, less stress, or more joy, no stress, which didn't show up as like a slogan in there. You could build around that. I can appreciate that as a homeowner. I want to enjoy my
mm-hmm.
house. I don't want constantly worried about what's going
Yep,
to, break and who I have to hire to fix it. So I think visually the creative brief may have been off.
okay,
Content wise, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. So, again, I think Fiverr and Upworker can be really good sources for that, first draft of stuff. And
sure,
then you may want to call in somebody who's a little more cohesive, who
exactly,
knows a little bit more about what you're trying to do, and kind of refine it from there. I think it helps you define, like I said, it pools two audiences. Do you want a more elite crowd or do you want,
I want everybody to use this, not just upper middle class, but
Mhm,
how I'm targeting it starting out, just
mhm,
because, the area we live in, Parkland, Florida,
mhm,
is an upper middle class. It's middle class, upper middle class. And the the thing that I hear a lot of people say is I never know when somebody's coming to do an estimate if they hear that I live in Parkland, the price goes up. And
mhm,
that's no way to as a homeowner, you don't want that loss of control. That's kind of how it was born. The idea originally was through that having control of your. And it's funny when I asked the original logo guy, I said control is a big word, because you're gaining control of your home. You don't have to, like you said, I got a staff here. What the heck? I've got all these people working. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, knowing who you are, knowing who we didn't grow up, we worked hard to get what we have. I don't think I'll ever get to the point where like I'll just write a blank check. I tend to like, you know, the concept of this is for people who are still cost conscious.
Sure.
Yeah, I can outsource, I can make better use of my time than whatever, mowing my own lawn or fixing my own faucet. But I still care. I still want a good deal. I still, money matters to me. I still want to send my kids to college. Like, to me, that's your crowd.
That's
and
right.
If that's the case, then, and it sounds like we're talking through that.
Yeah.
This is how you iterate. This is how you find out who your audience is, which then works into all sorts of stuff. Because I also do, targeting, and then where you're going to market it. You're going to do it on connected TV or OTT or Facebook or Google Ads. You can set all those parameters on how you want to target it based on where they live and their income levels and all that stuff. That all becomes part of the equation.
So that's a perfect segue to the next thing. So we're talking about brand and logo and name and all this stuff. We spent a lot of time on that, which I'm glad we did. But your background is in digital, and it's running a digital team and doing that. So you understand that part of it. The first part is your brand, your identity, and then the second part is distribution, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get it out in front of the right people? And to answer your question about where home service is going to start and how we're going to do it, I'm going to do grassroots to start. I have a lot of relationships here. It's in Parkland, and I'm gonna have homeowners that live in Parkland and South Florida, use it, and I want people that are transparent. I want them to tell me everything that's wrong. Of course, I want to hear some good stuff too, but it's okay for the first month to hear all the bad stuff, because that's how you get better. No different than the logo that I did. You can't improve something if you don't know, uh, how to improve it. So that's the part where I really want people, everybody who's involved in watching this and watch this journey, to just download the app, sign up, and use it when it's available. It's going to be one home, by the way. I'm excited, and we're all going to know it as one home. But I'm excited to see. Can you show me a little?
Yeah.
Let's take a little peek.
Let's do it.
I'm getting excited here.
All right. So here's what you had, and
Yep.
you do it on your phone, or I'm on my phone, but
Yep.
we'll put this up for you on the screen. Okay?
Yep.
So as you can see, if you squint at that, what do you see?
One.
We see one,
Yeah.
right? So if that was your goal, great. But I would argue you want one home.
Yes.
Right? And then you can even see how the spacing is a little off on the home
Yes.
services.
Yes.
It's not there. So now, even just taking the exact logo you had.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
So now you move one home to
Oh,
one thing, and you
shit.
make that the same color as the blue.
Yeah.
It's more pleasing to the eye.
Yes.
With service spaced out below. Okay. And you still have your icon. Or, what I was saying, there are other ways to.
Wow. I like
kind of
that.
create your
Yeah.
app icon. Now, again, the O, the N, the M, the E, those are all levers that space out really well. Okay. And
So the O with so now that would be a totally different logo.
So this is a different.
This is not the
just something
option.
to
That's not
consider.
secondary, like you said.
This is not
Okay.
secondary. But then this one came, and this is my preferred one of all of it.
Oh, because it's got the one
Because
too.
it's got the one where it's a little clearer, but it still says one home. So now
Very
we've taken the letter
cool.
one, we've made that
Oh,
the left
wow.
edge of the E.
That's
Okay,
awesome.
you've still got the home, which sort of fills that space, around the O, and then you got service. It's bold. It stands out.
I
It's
love
a
it,
little bit
man.
unique. It's
That
pretty
is cool.
right? So, I thought it's a lot of potential. And again, this is just something I did in like 8 or 10 hours, of thinking about this. So,
That is awesome,
and
man.
even I do that too. Like, I know, I'm enough of a designer to be dangerous, but even I'll still at some point go like, okay, here's an idea. Let me call in a real person who only does graphic design.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, how do you get it to the point where you can communicate what you ultimately want to see? And then sometimes you got to realize, all right, I've run the baton as far as I can here. Let me pass it off
Exactly.
to the professional. But it's cost effective that way, because you're not paying some super elite designer from
Exactly.
scratch.
20 grand.
Yeah, 20 grand.
Yeah.
I can do that, and then just do a little spit shining, and there's all sorts of ways for businesses who are just starting out to do it. But I say don't overthink it. You know, like know that color palette. You can find that. Like you can Google that, or we can link to it in your YouTube profile. There's a couple ways. I always ask people, and I told you this story. I was in Houston once, and the commercial unit was having this really tough time with a client. I think we could say Gulfgate Dodge. they knew what they wanted, but they couldn't articulate it. And I said to them, they came to me and they said, Mike, we need your help. I said, have them give you 3 adjectives for how they would want someone to describe their business. One of those 3 adjectives was dynamic. I'm like, I got it. Okay. So what we did, we took the 2 Gs in Gulfgate, we had them fly behind the camera and did a light pass, and then they revealed Gulfgate. And it was
dynamic. Yeah. And that's what they told you what it was.
They told me what it was.
Yeah. So what it was,
everybody loves to hear their own ideas back, right? And they're like, this is great. And that was the one. We solved it like that. So, think about that. When you think about those 3 adjectives that you want somebody to associate with a business, and don't go to 5, don't go to 6, because nobody's going to do that.
Okay.
The consumer. Make sure that your colors and your shapes and everything that goes with it, looks like that. Maybe bold is one thing that's different than elegant. You want to think about it. Just think about it in your mind for a second, right? Bold and energetic brings a visual to you. Elegant and refined is a whole different thing. It's different fonts, different shapes.
So mine is
colors.
trust.
Yours is trust. And that's why blue is sort of a universal color of trust.
That was by luck.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. I think you stumbled onto a few good things. So I know you're kind of like, I just kind of made it up. And I don't think it's that good. I think it's better than you think.
Awesome.
And, I looked it up, and there are easy ways to search for trademark. And you have a lot of trademark ability. It's called the TEST, the USTO TEST database. You can Google, and you can do a basic search on what's out there. So if you're a new business and you're thinking about doing it, anybody can look
USTO?
USTO, I believe. It's the TEST trademark database.
Or you can just Google test trademark.
Just Google test. Test trade.
There goes that name, database. Google again.
Yeah, exactly right. And you just do it. And what's interesting about trademarks is you would think you need to trademark it first. You actually need to use it in practical application first, which kind of makes sense, because otherwise people would be trademarking things left and right and just squatting on it with no intent to use it.
You got to have it.
So you have to use it for something first and then file.
Use it as put a website up or do something.
Like you could do this. The fact that we're talking about this on this podcast, it's kind of out there in the ether right now. Or if you put it on your website, or at least you have some business cards or something, just to say, I am serious about using this trademark in some capacity. Because remember, people used to do that with URLs all the time. They would just squat on some URL in hopes that one day somebody would go, oh my God, they're going to pay me $30,000 for this because, I bought some
TigerWoods.com.
TigerWoods.com. Exactly right. So it's the same thing with trademarks.
Yeah. Let me tell you, man, this is amazing. These 30 minutes have been incredible. Actually, back up. It's been about an hour and a half for Mike, because he helped me with the lighting too. On top of that, what a great guy he is. So, Mike, where can people find you at, man? I mean, is it online? Your business is
VanBrieMedia.com. You can find me there. I love talking about this stuff. So, free advice whenever it comes. You can look me up on LinkedIn.
We got to get you on a pod. You get your own podcast going too, man. I got a studio on wheels if
there
you need
you go. Oh man,
you're more than welcome to use this.
I feel like giving the spotlight to others. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm here to help, and I hope you help me back sometime.
For sure, man. Always count on me for that, man. That goes back to what we talked about in the last one, which was giver's gain. Networking doesn't work if you just think about yourself. It's always about how to give and help others, and Mike's a testament to that. And man, I appreciate you much, man. Thanks, my man.
You got it.
All right. And that concludes this episode of Opportunity Knocks.